Today we're looking at the NIV Basic Study Bible by Zondervan. Before we do that, if you have not subscribed already, go ahead, click the subscribe button and click the notifications icon, because that's how you enter into the giveaways that we do here on the channel from time to time, including the big one that we're going to do when we hit 10,000 subscribers. We'll be giving away the entire Anchor Bible Dictionary set as a way of saying thank you to all 10,000 of you who by that point will have subscribed. We're coming in close. We're getting close to 8,000 right now. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and make sure you click the notifications icon. Doing both of those things is a great way to show your support for this channel as we continue to grow this ministry. And as always, this ministry is entirely donor funded, no Patreon, no paid membership tiers. We just ask people, if you like what we're doing, consider supporting Disciple Dojo financially. Put a link in the description below for how you can do that. All right, let's look at a very basic study Bible. So this Bible is marketed as being both economical and concise, and it is both of those. It retails for $19.99, so $20, and it's in paperback. It's 1,458 pages, and there are no color maps in the back. In fact, there are no maps anywhere. There are no illustrations whatsoever. It is a red letter edition, but that's the only color that you're going to find throughout this Bible. It is double columned. You have the study notes here at the bottom, and at the bottom of each page in the right-hand corner, you have these boxes with all of the cross references for that page. Now, here's what you're going to find. Presentation page, title page, table of contents, quick introduction. Even the introduction to this Bible is concise. The preface to the NIV, and then you're into the Old Testament. Boom, Genesis right there. So there are no essays in this Bible at all. Each book introduction is literally about 2 paragraphs. There's a paragraph about authorship. There are 2 points about around the time it was written and a key verse. And then there's a paragraph on the theme. That's all you get in terms of book introductions. Paragraph, key verse and time, paragraph. Very short, very concise. When we get to the back, after Revelation, then you have table of weights and measures. You have 2 indexes. Theological notes indexed by location. So this is the canonical order. These are all the notes in Genesis and Exodus, Leviticus, etc. That's about 3 pages. And then the same index, but they're noted by title. So you can look up a specific topic in alphabetical order that you have questions about. Then after that is the condensed Kohlenberger Concordance, and it's about 77 pages, I think. So not exhaustive, but pretty substantial. And that's it. And then the back cover. So what are you going to find in terms of theological perspective when you use the NIV Basic Study Bible? My hunch is that this is just the condensed version of all of the notes in the NIV Study Bible, that they've kind of pulled a few of the notes from the different books, took out all of the charts, all of the maps, all the essays, and just given you sort of a bare bones collection of study notes for each book. But I can't verify that because I cannot find anywhere that lists the contributors. Couldn't find it on the website. It's nowhere printed in the Bible itself. So I don't know who oversaw this, and I don't know whose contributions from other study material that Zondervan publishes are included in this. It's a mysterious, anonymous, basic study Bible. So let's do what we do in our Bible reviews and just take a quick scan of how the NIV Basic Study Bible handles passages in Genesis, Exodus, Romans, and Revelation. The introduction to Genesis and to the rest of the Pentateuch, it does lean towards Mosaic authorship. They don't say definitely that Moses wrote it, but they say Moses is believed to be the author going all the way back in the history of Judaism, Christianity. And so that's probably the operating assumption that the notes are coming from. The theme that sums up Genesis, it's very vague. Genesis is, of course, a complex book, so trying to sum up 50 chapters of an ancient epic in one paragraph is a daunting task for anyone. So what do we find in the notes themselves? Well, there's a little bit in the note on verse 1:1. There's a little bit that kind of either hints at or allows for something like a Paradise Lost or a gap theory view that all of the fall of Satan and the rebellion and all of that happened before the events of Genesis chapter 1. They're kind of stuck into the space between verse 1 and verse 2. You can see right there where it says it is possible that the rise, rebellion, and judgment of Satan transpired before the events of this chapter. So, of course, there's nothing about that whatsoever in the text. That's a later theological concept that people have tried to find back in Genesis. But, of course, the text doesn't say anything about that. One would have to read that back into this passage based on later theological unpacking. There's a note at 2:15 through 17 on the first covenant. And it posits that the first covenant in the Bible is the Edenic covenant. I mean, it flat out says right here, the Edenic covenant is the first covenant mentioned in the Bible. Now, of course, covenant is not actually mentioned in this passage. The first mention of covenant is going to come much later. So again, this is a theological view that the interpreter is kind of priming the reader to see in the text itself. And then at 3:14, there is another covenant. So they say there's the covenant at Eden, and then there's a covenant with Adam in 3:14 through 21. Once again, the Adamic covenant is the second covenant God made with man. Also at 3:16, the note on the words for desire and rule, you get a little bit of what complementarians try to play up in this passage, which is that the word desire has negative connotations, and they say it means an attempt to usurp authority or control. And so the desire that the woman has for her husband is not just a regular desire, but rather it's nefarious type of desire. And theologically, they would no doubt make the argument that that's how it's used in the next chapter of sin, desiring Cain. But you run into the problem that the only other time it's used is in the Song of Songs, when the desire between the beloved and the lover is good desire. So that's a legitimate point that interpreters do not agree on, and they just present one view here in these notes. And then when we come to Genesis 6, the sons of God and the daughters of humans, the whole passage about the Nephilim and who were these sons of God, they only give two of the three views. They give the view that the sons of God are the Sethites, the people who descended from Seth, and the daughters of humanity are Cain's offspring. But they note that there's problems with that view. And then they note the second view, which is that these are angels, fallen angels. But then they note the problems with that view as well in terms of angels being sexually active, and how that doesn't seem to fit with Jesus's description of angels not marrying or being given in marriage. But they do not mention the third view of the sons of God, which is that that is a term for ancient tyrant kings, people like Gilgamesh, people in the pre-flood world who were these warriors of renown or self-aggrandizing kings who took whoever they wanted from whoever they wanted in terms of sexual conquest. Now, all three views have problems, and anyone who comes down dogmatically on any one view is going beyond the text, but they don't note that third view. They only give two of the three views in the notes, and that's unfortunate. Then when we get to chapter 7, they take a fairly literalistic approach. I'll show you what I mean. In this note right here, 7:11, on the springs of the great deep, the floodgates of the heavens, they say, until this time no rain had fallen on the earth, but it was watered by a mist. Chapter 2, verses 5 through 6. This description of the first rain portrays a thundering catastrophic event, accompanied by violent upheaval of the earth's crust, and geysers of water bursting forth from the depths. That's a very young earth creationist way of reading the text. And it can also be translated as on the earth or in the land. And there's a question of what is it talking about? No rain had fallen where? And many interpreters would say in the land where God planted the garden. It's not saying no rain had ever fallen on the earth, that the earth had existed without any such thing as precipitation until the flood of Noah. Because you have agriculture going on. You have animal husbandry going on. You have all of these advances in technology happening. You have the world going on, and it's beyond belief to suggest that the water cycle did not exist until the flood of Noah. But yet you will find that in a lot of literalistic young earth creationist approaches to Genesis. They also take a literalistic approach in terms of the extent of the flood, another issue where Genesis interpreters are divided. The note at 719 that says all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered, there's a legitimate question about, is this a stock phrase? Is this hyperbole? Is this just referring to the water coming down, drenching all of the high mountains rather than submerging them? There are all of these questions about that, none of which enter into this. The note just says, this explicit declaration accompanied by the assertion in verse 21 that every living thing died makes it clear that this was no localized event, but in actuality a worldwide catastrophic flood. Now, whether that's true or not, that is only one interpretation. So presenting it as if that's clearly the only way of reading the text, to me, is a bit disingenuous. At least for a broad study Bible, there should be acknowledgement of different ways interpreters, faithful evangelical interpreters, read and understand the Genesis flood. Now, when we come to Genesis 15 and the covenant God made with Abraham, there is a good note on verse 17 about the smoking fire pot passing between the pieces, and it spells out what that would have signified as a self-maledictory covenant oath ceremony, and it doesn't specifically link it to the only other passage in the Bible that spells this ceremony out, which is in Jeremiah. But down in the cross references here at the bottom, there is a cross reference to Jeremiah 34:18. It's just kind of tucked away down here. So that's why cross references are important if your Bible has them. When we come to Exodus, so the introduction is just super, super vague. It really doesn't prepare you for what you're going to read in terms of the genre, how Exodus is structured and outlined, anything like that. They note that the Pharaoh of the Exodus is most likely Pharaoh Amenhotep II. This takes an earlier view of the Exodus in the mid 1400s BCE. There are some good notes throughout on the issue of Pharaoh hardening his heart and what that means and why it's spoken of in different ways throughout the events. If you haven't seen our superhero seminary video here on the channel where we take a deep dive into Pharaoh's hardening of heart, check that out. I'll put a link in the description below. There's also a note around the 10th plague, 1022, about the total darkness. And they do note that this sign, this wonder, this plague, was a direct assault against the gods of Egypt, namely the sun god, Ra. But they don't note that for all of the other 10 signs, each of which also target a different Egyptian deity or realm. So it's good that they did mention it. It's just unfortunate they only mentioned it once of all of the 10 signs. And in terms of the numbers of the Exodus, the note at 1237 on the phrase 600,000 men or 600 Eleph, they said this number of men would indicate a total population of perhaps 3 million men, women, and children, which is an astronomical number. Usually it's said, around 2 million, even by conservative interpreters. And then there's a note that says, see Numbers chapter 1. And the note in Numbers chapter 1, 44 through 46, it says the number of able-bodied men who were at least 20 years old would indicate a population of between 2 and 5 million, including women, children, and older or infirm men who were not counted in the census. So they're positing a number for the Israelites of between 2 and 5 million that came out of Egypt, which is just astronomical. If you wonder why this matters, we've done our video here on the channel, tips on reading the book of Numbers. And one of those tips talks about the numbers and what's going on there and where interpreters are divided on that question. But this would represent the extreme high end of any count of the people involved in the Exodus, whereas other evangelical scholars would put it down much, 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 much lower than this. You have to check out that video if you want to hear the argument for why. Now we come to Romans. The introduction, again, very short, very sparse, but pretty good overall. It does kind of lay out the main purpose of the book of Romans. It doesn't really get into how to read it, the different approaches interpreters take, and what Paul was doing rhetorically through the book of Numbers, which is very important. There's no mention of that. And then the study notes throughout the book are surprisingly few. I thought for Romans there would be more than for some of the other books, which is usually the case in study Bibles. For instance, there's no discussion in Romans chapter 7 of who the I is, or is Paul talking about his ongoing everyday battle with sin, or is he talking about someone before they come to Christ? What's going on there? There's nothing, no notes on any of that. The notes in chapters 9 through 11 are very non-committal. So on the issue of predestination versus free will, they don't take an approach either way. They just say this is a mystery. The question of who is all Israel, the note in chapter 11 just says all Israel doesn't mean every individual Israelite, but refers to the nation as a whole. And they leave it at that. They don't really talk about the process by which all Israel will be saved, whether that's through what's being described in chapter 11 as Jews come into the tree and are grafted back in as natural branches, or whether at the end of time there's going to be a massive influx, a turning on the part of the majority of Jewish people to Jesus as Messiah after the full number of Gentiles have come in. They don't get into that discussion at all. And it's a pretty important discussion in how you read Romans 9 through 11. When we come to Revelation, the overview does mention at the very end that Revelation is Jewish apocalyptic literature, and it communicates through symbolic imagery. But the overall approach in the study notes are futurist. They continually treat the images of Revelation as prophecies of events that are yet to happen, even in our days. Now, they do note in the opening chapters the historical nature of the letter to the churches, and when we come to Revelation 3 and the church of Laodicea, they do give in the study note a very good note that talks about Laodicea's water supply and what it was known for in terms of its wealth and banks and textile and even the medical school. So they come right up to the edge of unpacking the background that makes sense of what Jesus says to the Laodicean church, but they just give a glimmer of it. So if you didn't already know how that background fits into what Jesus says, it might be a little bit of a challenge to get from that to that. But when we come to Revelation 7, it talks about the tribulation that the saints come out of, and it does speak of a future great tribulation, which is different than the normal tribulation that John has already talked about. So a futurist reading of this passage. And interestingly, their note on the 144,000 from the tribes of Israel, they don't say that they are actually 144,000. They say that that number symbolizes the all Israel who will be saved after the fullness of the Gentiles come in. So not a traditional dispensationalist approach, probably more of a historical premillennial approach, but still seeing these numbers as symbolic, just symbolic of only ethnic Israel, which of course not all interpreters agree, including the one making this review. The note on 666 was interesting in its both futurism and its non-committal nature. It basically says nobody knows what this number means, and only the people who are living at the time of the fulfillment of the prophecies in this book need to understand this clearly. The Lord will make it plain. So no discussion of what 666 would have meant to the actual recipients of the letter. It just says when it's time for God to make it plain, God will make it plain. That's a weird study note to find in a study Bible, I'm not going to lie. And then when we come to the 1,000 years, it takes a premillennial approach. It speaks as the 1,000 years are a future reality, a future event. There's no mention of either amillennialism or postmillennialism. It's operating solely from a premillennial view, not necessarily a dispensational premillennial view, but a premillennial view nonetheless. If you don't know what premillennial, amillennial, postmillennial mean, check out our Bible Jargon Explained playlist here on the channel, where we unpack each of those terms and how they affect how you read not just Revelation, but all of the rest of Scripture as well. So that's it for the NIV Basic Study Bible. Let's talk about the pros and the cons. The cons are this just doesn't seem like a study Bible. I mean, yes, technically it is. It has book introductions and it has notes that walk through the text, but they're very sporadic. They're seemingly haphazard. I never knew what position I was going to read from one book to the next. They're called together in a way that it just felt disjointed. Disjointed is probably the best way I would describe the study notes. Not terrible. I just don't know how much they would genuinely help someone who is studying through a book of the Bible. The fact that the contributors are unknown, or at least I couldn't find who the actual contributors were, that always makes me wary. I prefer when study Bibles let you know who's contributing, because people who don't know better can pick up a study Bible and assume that it's just the Bible and everything in it is the Bible. So I think there should always be a clear delineation that in study Bibles, the notes and the essay, well, there are no essays, but the notes and the introductions and all of that are the interpretations of people. And there needs to be a way that you can find out whose interpretation you're reading. And if they list it somewhere and I just missed it, like I said, couldn't find it on the website, it's not printed anywhere in this Bible. So I don't know who the contributors are. I feel like this is a stripped down version of a fuller study Bible. I mean, that's what they market it as. So that's not a knock against it. It is what it claims to be. The question is, would you be better off buying this or buying the NIV study Bible or the NLT study Bible or some other more traditional study Bible? I'm not sure. The pro to the basic study Bible, easily, it's the cost. This only costs $20. So you're getting what you pay for. This is above a text-only Bible. So if you had the choice of handing somebody a Bible with no notes, no introductions whatsoever, just the text only, or handing them this might be more helpful if cost was an issue of buying somebody a fuller study Bible. But if I gave this to someone, I would tell them that. I would say, this is not a full study Bible. This is just to give you some background information. This, at best, should prime the pump for actual biblical study of the text, and eventually graduating up to a full study Bible. It's like a gateway study Bible. So those are my thoughts. I would love to hear yours if you've used this. If you have any questions about it, leave them in the comments section below. I try to take a look as I'm able. And again, if you haven't yet done so, subscribe to this channel. I'm actually going to be giving this away in a future giveaway contest, along with some other study Bibles that we've reviewed here on the channel. So the only way you'll know about any of those contests and giveaways, including the one that's running right now, is if you are a subscriber and you have enabled the notifications. That lets YouTube know that you're interested, you're invested in the channel, and you want to know when new stuff comes out. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here next time at Disciple Dojo.